Wonderful. All right. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I'm really excited to see everyone here. I would like to start with a little round of introduction. So I'll start with myself. My name is Emmy van Kleef, and I am the managing director of Mustardseed. Next to me is Katrina. Katrina?
Hi, I'm Katrina Bull, and I work for the operations at Mustardseed, so I support Emmy and the board.
Okay, then we have Kirsten.
Hi, I'm Kirsten. I'm one of the researchers, and my project was on Africa.
And Marina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marina, and I was also one of the researchers, and I focused on South America.
And we have Boudewijn.
Yes, my name is Boudewijn Toren. I work for Herenboeren Netherlands, and we got a lot of requests from Africa and South America on regenerative farming. So I'm happy to be here.
And Bela, you're muted. Let's see if I can help you. Sorry, Bela, you're muted, but let's move on to Reinier.
No,
oh, there you are. Yeah.
I'm a trustee of Mustardseed.
Reinier?
Hi everyone, I'm Reinier. I'm involved in regenerative farm operation in Mozambique, where we do large-scale farming. Just started to plant trees there. And I'm also a consultant in land and water management.
Thank you. And Massi?
Yeah. Hi all, I am Massi Miatton, or Massi, shorter version. And I did a research project for Latin America with my colleague Michael.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, hi everyone, good to see you. My name is Michael, and I was working with Massi on regenerative agriculture in Latin America.
Okay. And Stefan?
Hi everyone. One of the trustees based in Costa Rica, just finished the Masters in Sustainable Aquaculture. Really excited to hear the presentations.
Thank you. Kevin, Chu?
Yeah, hi guys, it's Calvin here. I believe my colleague Chen is also on the line. We're Silver Strand Capital. We're based out of Singapore, and we invest in and try to catalyze systems change in regenerative agriculture.
Thank you. Alida?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm also one of the trustees of Mustardseed, and I'm a development practitioner myself. I normally stay in Uganda, East Africa, but as of now, I'm in the Netherlands. I'm very happy to be part of this gathering.
Thank you. Then we have John Liu.
Oh.
Yeah, we hear you.
Hello. Yeah. I'm a bit of a mountain man. Sorry, I'm on Mount Shasta in Northern California. So great to be here. Wonderful that this is taking place. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. And lastly, we have Chen.
Oh, hi. Yes, I think Calvin just mentioned me. I'm also from Silver Strand. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing yourself. So I would like to then to start. If there's some background noise in your room, please mute yourself. Let me share my screen for a tiny presentation and also the program of today. Let's see if this will work. There you go. As I said, we're very excited that we are concluding this first round of research And today we will be enjoying a conversation with our network and listen to the views from the researchers on the work they have executed in the past 2 months. First of all, we are incredibly grateful for the time and energy that has been put in the work. We highly recommend their spirit, energy, and thoroughness in conducting the research and presenting their results. Mustardseed Trust's mission is to enable worldwide conversations and actions resulting in societies and economies which care for our planet and all beings on it. It's important to us that we enable conversations and inspire humanity to restore ecosystems and ensure healthy food supply. The mindset shift we are looking for is that people care for the earth and that this becomes a principle that is rooted in all aspects of our society. We value caring as a leading principle in our vision and our aims. There is an increasing consciousness that our depletive and extractive-based production can be turned into regenerative, circular, and overall healthier way of life. And as you are aware, regenerative agriculture is therefore one of our impact areas where we see a care economy coming into practice. And we are convinced that regenerative agricultural practices contribute to a care economy as it grows nutritious food that restores the mental and physical well-being of consumers. It takes care of the commons by responsible use of earth, water, and restoration of earth, water, air, biodiversity, and climate. It gives farmers hope, a sense of purpose, and strengthen their autonomy. It can restore the balance and connection between people and the earth. It balances healthy guts with healthy soils, and it moves the connection from domination into partnership. It can contribute to the resilience of global warming, as it also sequesters carbon. And realizes long-term sustainable financial return, bring back jobs, business activity and security, increases the value of land and decreases dependency on current financial systems. Therefore, in 2020, we decided to frame more research in the regenerative agricultural space. We wanted to remain open-minded and critical towards our impact areas and our current interventions within them. We are mindful that we don't know what we don't know, and we may have bias in certain interventions because of our current partnerships and our current thinking. So the purpose of the research was therefore to create a body of knowledge and a divergence in our impact area and our interventions. Our terms of reference that we wrote was structured around the main research questions. What are the actors and factors to either enhance or inhibit a shift in thinking and practice to regenerate?
Deze voet voor je zo ongeveer, weet je het midden.
And I'm hearing some noise. Let me just mute.
Maybe Jan Hein is needs to be muted. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Jan Hein, I've just muted you. So thank you for joining us, Jan Hein. Let me just finish here. So as I said, that the first approach that we after framing our terms of reference, we engaged Kirsten van Reisen, Marina Yamaoka, Massi Miatton, and Michael Karner to help us with mapping the regenerative agriculture space in South Latin America and Africa. The work they've done will impact our search for the trim tabs in these regions. Besides the detailed and extensive mapping of the actors and factors in this region, they were also able to present different frameworks for classification and take deep dives of key actors and innovations in the field. So today, the researchers are presenting their reports to us, and we've asked them to present their opinion according to the following questions. Can you give an example of 2 actors and their innovation that are driving the practice of regenerative agriculture in your area and that have the potential to replicate a scale? Another question we asked them is like, what are the next logical steps for Mustardseed to take in either research or in the regenerative agricultural space? And if you could spend $5 million, where would you spend it on in regenerative agriculture? And the results from our research will be for us as Mustardseed Trust the starting point for convergence towards finding interventions that are inspiring humanity to a care economy. And the purpose of our meetup today is to listen to the presentation of the researchers. Internally, we shall further discuss what the consequences of the research will bring to us and how it shapes our support for it further. I really hope that the conversation today will be an inspiration for all of us. And the program is as follows. After my opening notes, I would like to invite Marina Yamaoka to start presenting on agroecology in South America. And after this conversation, we'll have time for emerging Q&A. This will be followed by Massi and Michael, who make a presentation on regenerative agriculture in Latin America, followed by emerging Q&A. And we conclude with Kirsten van Reisen on regenerative agricultural factors in Africa and emerging Q&A. And at the end of this conversation, I will invite Alida, who is the chair of the Board of Trustees, to do the closing remarks. So without further ado, yeah, Marina, fire away. Let me stop sharing my screen. If you want, you can take the stage.
Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being here today. I'm very happy to be part of this conversation. It's so much better having this conversation and exchanging with you than just sending a 10-minute audio by the end of the research. So before I start answering the 3 questions, I'm just going to briefly introduce myself. So my name is Marina, as you all know, and I'm Brazilian, and I have a bachelor in journalism and a master's degree in international development with a focus in agriculture. And for the past almost 9 years, I have been working with social and environmental issues, ranging from deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon to following the UNFCCC climate change negotiations. And since 2016, I have started to specialize in research in sustainable agriculture, notably agro-ecology. So my research for Mustardseed Trust was focused in South America. And I try to, as much as possible and as extensively as possible with the time frame that we had, to answer the question, what are the factors and who are the actors enhancing or inhibiting a shift towards agroecology? And before diving into the results, a little bit of my research, I think it's important for me to explain why I have chosen to use the term agroecology, because as you might see from the other researchers, they've kept using regenerative agriculture. And my decision was basically made by the historical use of the term agroecology in the region. So there are historical researchers such as Miguel Altieri and even Stephen Glisman, who is not South American, but has done a lot of research in the region. And they've been using the term since the 80s. And I also think that it's a term that has been gaining international attention in the past few years. And it also makes a nice bridge between the practices of agriculture and the care economy and the food system transformation that Mustardseed Trust aims to achieve. And as the research question is quite broad, I've tried to ground my research on existing frameworks that would allow me to analyze the data with more accuracy than just based on qualitative data coming from interviews. For me, it was, and it is very important not to provide somehow kind of guesses as answers. So I try to keep my approach as scientific as possible. And then coming from the answers of these frameworks, then I moved towards qualitative interviews. So this is a little bit of how I approached my research. And then regarding the questions that we were asked to answer to start this conversation, so the 2 examples of actors that are providing innovations and that are driving the practice of agroecology in South America, the 2 examples that I chose, the first one is the Rede de Sementes do Xingu, so the Xingu network, seeds network, which is a network of native seeds that works with local collectors. And this is an interesting example, as it's not only an economic exchange of the seeds that are sold and that generate a revenue for the local population that are collecting the seeds, but it's also a way of recovering degraded lands that used to be pasture, as well as to encourage the seeds collectors themselves to recover their land. Moreover, when we're talking about agriculture, this is the very basis of it. So it's a fundamental resource that allows us to produce food. Therefore, it can also be a barrier if farmers don't have access to good quality seeds, and if they can't afford them. So this network has also proved to have an impact in terms of soil recovery, in terms of hectares, water recovery, in terms of watersheds. And it's a very specific arrangement as it works with native seeds of a certain biome. So I see that there is a potential to replicate this kind of business model that has already proved to be successful. It could be either in other regions and biomes in Brazil, such as Cerrado, for example, or in other countries, such as I'm thinking about like the northern part of Argentina that is also suffering with deforestation as well. And then the second example that I chose, the second actor, it's one of the actors from what I've called kind of categorized as the agro-ecological knowledge hubs. I could talk about Ernst Gotsch, which was also part of my colleagues' research in Latin America, from what I could see from the report. But I don't want to be very biased just because he's not Brazilian, but he's working in Brazil. So I'm gonna talk about Finca La Cosmopolitana that I have interviewed also as part of my work. But any of the agroecological knowledge hubs actors could be a good fit for this example. And talking about La Cosmopolitana, they are a historical example in Colombia, and they're showing that the practice is working. So they're generating evidence and also showcasing that agroecology works. And they are talking to farmers, they are talking to students, and it's a good entry point for people to learn that more sustainable practices are possible. They also help to consolidate agroecology by spreading the knowledge. They have international recognition, and again, they could benefit from partnering with Mustardseed Trust to gain scale in what they are already doing, because they are already very well established. In terms of what would be the next logical steps for Mustardseed in terms of research and in the regenerative agriculture, agroecological space, I think it's important to consider three main questions. The first one is for the trust to decide if you want to focus on the practice of agriculture with farmers, or if for you it is also a possibility to work in another entry point to change the food system. And I'm saying this because many of the comments on my first draft that were super relevant and made a lot of sense, they were very related to the need to place farmers at the center of the discussion and at the center of my research. And I think that this is great, but I don't see this as being the only possibility. I believe that if we are aiming at a systemic change, then there are different ways of kind of breaking the lockings of the current agriculture and food system. So when I had a conversation with Amy and Katrina during the process of doing my research, for example, questions arose around the role of consumers. And I do think that they can help to drive the change. So having said all this, I think it's just one of the first steps for you is to ask if you want to focus exclusively on farmers or if there are other actors that you want to work with, because this will definitely have an impact on the choice of with whom you're going to be partnering with. Then the second question that I think that you should consider is, having decided this, it is also important to understand if you want to work with the actors that are already very well established, such as Ernst Gotsch, La Cosmopolitana, because you can help them to scale, but they are already promoting the change. Or if you want to work with those that are on the tip, like right behind them, they just need a little bit of a push to also become very well established. And one way of choosing these actors later on is to look at the levels of transformation framework that I used and that are part of the spreadsheet that was part of my research, so that you can also try to see if you want to work with those that are on level 3, so those that are already promoting and working with agroecology but just need a little bit of a push, or if you really want to focus on those that already well established. And then the third consideration is very linked to the second one, is regarding the time frame, like by when Mustardseed Trust wants to see the impact and how you want to measure it. Just because, for example, when we're talking about the Rede de Sementes do Xingu, so the Xingu Seeds Network, it took around 5 years for them to see the results of the land being recovered. And I think this also has an impact on the choice that you're going to be making. If it's something that you really want to see by 3 months, a year, 10 years. So I think this is one very important point to be considered. And then in terms of research, I think that the next steps could be to have a larger sample of vectors to be interviewed to really understand the obstacles and the levers and how they are related. Of course, this is what I've done, but I've done only a very, it's a glimpse of what can be done with much more depth. Different obstacles and levers were mentioned during my interviews, but it would also be good to have a larger sample that allows for further exploration and a confirmation of what is happening on the ground. This would also help you to understand where do you think that this push is, how this push coming from mustard seed can be targeted and very precise in its impact. And then lastly, but not less important, where I would spend $5 million if I could. And I would say socio-economic arrangements regarding seeds, such as the Rede de Sementes do Xingu. And this is because this is a very complex arrangement. Nevertheless, it's a very successful case because it provides seeds, it generates income for the collectors, it recovers natural resources, it promotes knowledge exchange between the farmers and the collectors on how to best collect, on how to have best practices regarding planting and cropping. It engages youth and women as well, and it protects biodiversity. And I really see it tackling many of the obstacles and with the potential of being replicated to strengthen agroecological practices in the region. And moreover, there are already local seeds banks in the region, and they are part of the spreadsheet, but they are very small. Like they have between 10 to 15 people that are organized, and I really think that they could benefit from being more structured. So the organization of the network has allowed them to establish a very commercial side. I mean, it became a business. So when a farmer needs seeds, they ask for the network, and then the network organizes like all of the different demands coming from the different farmers. They generate a common list, and then they ask for the collectors to provide the seeds. Then the collectors, they can count on the income that will be generated. They also see the impact of their work in terms of the land that is being recovered. And I really see the other seeds networks benefiting from being more organized and learning from this example, which again, I think is an example that generates revenue, protects local biodiversity, and recover natural resources. I'm gonna stop here, and I'm more than happy to answer questions during the Q&A. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for your very comprehensive presentation covering, all the questions. Well done. Really interesting to hear. I agree that one of the things that really stood out in your report were these examples, the seed network, and also the Finca Las Cosmopolitana. In terms of what the next steps can be, we need to consider what kind of level of practice do we want to focus on, a level of establishment, and also time frame and impact. And actually, that's a good question we have within our work all the time, especially in regenerative agriculture, ecosystem restoration, also as a funder. How do you want to measure impact? When can you see if work has, if the impact is what was foreseen up front, and what kind of, when do you want to see those returns? So thank you for raising that. And I wanted just 1 second to share my screen to show everyone who maybe did not yet had a chance to see the spreadsheet that Marina created, because I was we were very impressed by the level of detail that she created in this. So here, this is one Airtable, and there's a link to this spreadsheet in her report. Basically, this is a list of all the people that she put in the database that she came across and level of involvement. And here are all the key levers and barriers that you can then use as parameters to shift through these actors. So, for example, the level of transformation, what level are they in building in regenerative agriculture, and then you can play around with this. So definitely have a look at her spreadsheet, because it's a wealth of information. Does anyone have any emerging questions?
I have a point of information. She proposed an organization on which she wanted to support, to invest at $5 million, if I got it well. Could you pop up that also in her report? Is that easily available?
Yes, it's one of the actors that I've interviewed. It's on the section guaranteeing resources, and it's the actor that I've interviewed.
Yeah, absolutely. Shall I share my screen, Marina?
Yeah.
Sure.
Page 23, I think.
Which page?
Page 23 of the Word document.
Oh, here you go. Rhizoma Agro. This is page 33.
That's not mine.
oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I think this links to yours. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was just here. Oh. Yeah. There we go.
And then it's page. Page 40.
There we go. Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, read the semantics. So basically, this is the same, Alida, as Marina described at the beginning of the presentation. As one of the actors that stood out, and I liked it. It's driven on it's revenue. So there's a commercial aspect to it. There's a good an argument for biodiversity, but also like the gender aspect that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions that came up?
Yes, so could we say a bit more how that would link to the local economy and the principle of a care economy? Could you say some more about that?
Yeah, so the network, it's kind of a bank of seeds, but it's a bank of native seeds, but it's only related to one specific biome. So it's this already brings the local kind of aspect to it, and it also works with local like smallholder farmers or even indigenous populations in Brazil that are collecting the seeds. They collect in their localities, even sometimes in their like gardens. Then they send everything to different what they call the seed houses that store them. Then they select the best seeds, and then they are sold to the other farmers that are needing them. But it's a very local arrangement in a specific region in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, Katrina? Oh yeah, maybe if you have a question, you can just raise your hand, so it's easy. Yeah, Bella, I know that you. Yeah.
Oh, Bella first.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Marina, you suggest sharing seeds. I like that idea a lot. Sharing between our community. But also, I wonder if there's anyone focused on enabling a knowledge base or common mind content in this area to be brought into being so as to enable everyone in the same way as seeds would enable everyone involved, most people involved in this area. Knowledge of all sorts of different things could enable that as well. Are you aware of any possibilities in that area?
Yes, Amy, just one question. Do you prefer to get a round of questions and then I answer, or we just do it one by one?
No, let's, I think we do, this is a natural way of doing it. Sure.
Okay, so just one thing, I think like even regarding the seeds network, there is a very important component of knowledge because the collectors, they are coming from different backgrounds, and as I said, there is a lot of there is a strong component of involving youth and women, and also different like smallholder farmers, different indigenous communities, and they do share a lot of knowledge between them on how to best collect the seeds, and also to how to best have how to have best practices in terms of using the seeds. So internally, they do have a very strong knowledge component. But then thinking about a more broad knowledge base example, there are on page 47 of the report is dedicated exclusively to what I've called the agro-ecological knowledge hubs. So it is a list of actors in the region that are very well established and that have been working on showcasing with evidence that agroecology works, and sharing the knowledge with other farmers, students, and sometimes even Finca La Cosmopolitana, which is the second example that I mentioned after the first question. They are also they can also receive tourists, so that's why I've called them knowledge hubs.
Yeah. Thank you. Are there any other questions or general comments? Massi. Oh,
Yes,
sorry, Katrina after that, and then Michael after that. Yeah. Go ahead, Massi.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, I was curious about agroecology. Apologies if you I lost the connection when you were speaking about it at the beginning, so I don't know if you touched about it already. But it has been on. I mean, it's quite a consolidated thing in Latin America now. It has been along for many years, and it's also in the constitutions of some countries. I was just curious, how do you see it, this phase in which the agroecological movements are in, compared to the whole history of agroecology? Like, do you see it as just your opinion about the whole phase of the movement? I think would be interesting. Thanks.
Yeah. As you said, I didn't really talk about it in the beginning of my presentation, but as you said, it has a very strong history in the region, in Latin America and in South America. I see it becoming much more consolidated and also gaining political space. But at the same time, that's a personal comment. I see it that it has grown and it has moved from practice also towards gaining space in the political sphere. But at the same time, and I mean, it is, as you mentioned, some constitutions mention agroecological practices, or talk about agroecological practices, such as organic farming, or being against pesticides or GMOs, etc. But at the same time that it has become stronger and it has gained space, there is also a lack of confidence on the actual political gains. I mean, it's not because it is part of the constitution that it means that it's becoming that it's turning into practice. So I do see it as becoming a stronger movement, but it also has a lot of things to be done in terms of gaining practical track in the region.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Katrina?
Yes, thank you. I had a few questions. After reading the report, there's so much going on in South America. I want to ask: is this how? Why? Why is all this happening in South America? What are the drivers of it? Because often is it not even able to say that, because it's often political. It's sometimes the farmers. It's also a whole lot of different things. And secondly, there are the clearest obstacle that I thought from reading your report was ignorance. So even though there are a huge amount of projects within South America, that's why you put the emphasis on the networks, because they're the people that are going to work on other people basically not knowing about regenerative agriculture or agroecology and what the benefits there are, what the benefits that bring. So, and could you really say also, apart from ignorance, what the other obstacles are in South America? Yeah.
Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry. Yeah, I don't think it is possible to say that there is one specific reason of why all of this is happening in South America. I mean, it's a historical process. It has started with practice, and then it has been moving to universities, academia, and then being picked up by other organizations like development practitioners that are also looking into that. So I don't think it's possible to say there is one specific reason. It's more a historical process that has kind of sparkled in different areas in the region. And then the lack of, I mean, what you called ignorance, and I mean, for me, it's also a lack of recognition, although there are a lot of organizations working in the region. And this is why I think in the report I've mentioned as one of the obstacles, it's called compartmentalized knowledge, and it relates to what you were saying. It's about people not knowing that all of this is happening. So it's also a matter of showcasing that it is possible and that it works. And I think that what I've called the agro-ecological knowledge hubs, they can also play a role in that. And again, just because they are very well established, I mean, Ernst Gott, he's super well known, and then if you do partner with him, you're going to be having access to a lot of other people through him. He's one of the catalyzers of change. And then regarding the other obstacles, I mean, this is one of the things that I think that you should considerate when considering with whom you're going to be partnering with. But if you do think that working with consumers is one of the options, I do think the lack of access to markets is one of the main obstacles. And then it can be from the consumer side or also for those that are producing. But then it's up to you to decide if there's one side of the issue that you want to tackle.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely something we're also keen to look further into, like, you know, the lack of access to markets or that kind of pipeline from farm to fork, basically that distribution. There's definitely something there. I think Michael, do you have a quick question, because we want to round up and go to your presentation?
It was answered already,
okay.
So that's fine. Thank you, thank you, Marina, for the presentation.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for all your contributions. And then I would like to give the stage to Massi and Michael.
Is it okay if I share my screen, Emmy? I'm going to request it now.
Oh, you muted
yourself. Maybe we could do a short introduction as well, Michael. I think it was a nice start. yeah, thanks a lot, Marina, for your presentation. Indeed, yeah, really grateful to be here and to have opportunity to listen to your and to Kirsten's story. And okay, so I'm Massi, and I've been now I'm doing a master in agroecology, indeed, in the Netherlands. And for the last 6-7 years, I've been working mainly on field. At the beginning in permaculture, and then in regenerative agriculture projects, a bit in different countries, like Kenya, Jordan, Australia, North Italy, and Spain. And that was very nice to be able to see how different systems behave in different climates, and how different people behave as well in different contexts. And yeah, so engaging in this research was extremely interesting, and I'm really happy to have shared it with Michael. We met in Jordan, indeed, in a project. And please, Michael, if you want to introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks, Massi. I think that screen sharing is disabled, Emmy. So we could either send. Yeah. Okay. Great. Cool. Thanks. So yeah, my name is Michael. Thanks, Massi. Michael Karner. I'm based in Barcelona, Spain. And indeed, we met in Jordan along with John, actually, who's here. Really nice surprise. Quite a few years ago, and we've been working sort of in parallel ever since. I have a background in history and politics, the social sciences, international development. Spent the past 4 years working for the World Bank on water scarcity and land degradation in the Mediterranean, which is sort of my specialty zone, I guess, or zone of focus. But all the time entertaining a deep interest in what's going on the ground. So I'm also trained in permaculture and involved here in Barcelona locally with urban permaculture initiatives and urban agriculture, that kind of thing. And thank you to all of you at the Mustardseed Trust for giving us this opportunity to learn, to connect with each other, and to discover all of the amazing things that are going on in Latin America and elsewhere. And above all, thanks to Massi for these very fruitful and intense research and quarantine months. Okay, over to you, Massi. I'll try sharing the screen again. Yeah, it works now. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Just let me know when you can see it. Okay, share. Good?
Yeah, we see it now.
Okay,
nice.
Cheers.
Yeah. Okay, nice. So as an introduction, okay, we focused on regenerative agriculture, indeed, and it was interesting also to define in one way what regenerative is or not. Indeed, as we wrote in the report, somebody says that it's even impossible to define, to bound something that goes so beyond boundaries as is regeneration. But it was interesting to see that on one side, regeneration is a word that is used also like in agroecological circles, for example, when you want to shift the focus of the conversation more toward the ecological components. And on the other side, there is a series of actors, of organizations that utilize the word regeneration as to describe their activity, to describe their approach and what they do. So there are some kind of lineages of regenerative agriculture, and there is also a very nice article about it, kind of showing how the regeneration movement or movements are unfolding in Europe. And we found some of them also in Latin America, and we found an extremely rich context indeed in Latin America. So, so yeah, now we can start, Michael. So we can go to the next slide. Okay. So when we start, we've seen how there is a plurality of factors that are more or less well connected between each other, and that are engaged in different sectors. Now we said, okay, where are the main sectors that regeneration is displaying? And is you have a very strong current working with the livestock, another one engaged in agroforestry, other players that are working with broadacre annual cropping, and then you have a series of actors that is involved in funding, and another that is more involved in network or in building connections. So we have a lot of actors that are working at very different food system levels. And we've seen that also Marina used this framework of the food system levels in her research. That was a nice coincidence indeed. And we use it to kind of understand if one actor is more focusing his actions toward some improvements to the local farm, to the local ecosystem, or toward the redesign of a whole environmental setting, let's say, or at more socio-economical level, or more toward the food system perspective, a more like holistic point of view. So the questions that we had for today were, really engaging to answer. And we say, okay, if we have to pick up two actors, what do we do? So we said, okay, let's look at the nodal points. What would be the nodal intervention point to move on and to push our regeneration across one of these sectors? And so we were just, we're being guided in this, let's say, by some guiding questions, some indicators that are common to the impact investing world. So we said, what are those actors that can contribute the most in terms of scalability of a project, or how many people or hectares of land can be impacted, or what is the depth of regeneration promoted by an actor? Now, is this just substituting a technique with another one, or it is rebuilding those social connections and extending the meaning of regeneration to the whole eco-social tissue where the project is developing? Or what is the innovation or the action promoted by those actors? Would they be promoted by someone else? If not, or how essential it is, let's say, to push an innovation under a certain sector? And personal fit, of course, that is fundamental. How much that actor is like of fitting, in this case, our choice now, because we've been the one choosing for this presentation, and matching our skills, our interests, and our connections. So with this said, we decided to select two actors. Okay, so we picked up the main nodal points per sector, let's say, in our view. And out of these, we focused on two actors for this presentation. One is Ovis 21. Ovis 21 is a hub of the Savory Institute in Latin America. It's the oldest Latin American hub of the Savory Institute. The Savory Institute is promoting regenerative grazing worldwide, and Ovis 21 it's a hub, but also a local network led by producers and professionals who are directly engaged in the regeneration of their land. We selected it also because it's the oldest hub of the Savory Institute, and it's the center of a series of initiatives that are creating other networks that are building local realities around them, and are also connecting different Latin American actors between each other. For example, now during Corona, there was an initiative by an organization started by Ovis 21, like the Regeneration School is called, where we've been interviewing all these different ranchers, all these different innovators across Latin America, and that is contributing to create a network between different people that are working in the same way, but that, as Marina also was saying before, now there is still some compartmentalization. Right. And we chose it also because it has been at the forefront of one of the first regenerative certifications. Within Ovis, it was developed a certification called GRASS that led the basis for the global land to market initiative of the Savory Institute. That is one of the first regenerative agriculture certifications that is not based on practices, on what you're doing versus what you're not doing, but is based on outcomes, on measuring the actual environmental impact of regeneration of the land. And on measuring it with farmers, and on giving them the means. Is not a punitive mechanism, but is more a way to give them the means to understand what can be the improvement on their land, and to move towards regeneration. And we think this working at a double scale, both on the local and continental level, but also contributing to these global initiatives of the Savory Institute, it makes it a really interesting player in the sector. So now I pass the word to Michael for the second one.
Okay, thank you, Massi. So as mentioned before, we also try to focus on networks, which are very active in Latin America. There is, of course, Regeneration International, the biggest and most prominent regeneration network in in the world and let's say public awareness. We have also the Regenerative Communities Network, Latin America. Both of these are further described in the report. And of course, ecosystem restoration camps, which focus on restoration, but which are intimately related to the regenerative agenda, represented by John here. But for the purposes of this presentation, we decided to focus on a Latin American, let's say, self-generated network, which is coming from Chile originally, called ERES. So ERES means the Escuelas de Regeneración Ecosocial, Eco-Social Regeneration Schools. And we like this network because it's playing at several levels. So at the meta or the continental level, let's say, ERES is a network of member communities, which can be eco-villages or intentional communities that are distributed all around Latin America. And of course, they propose demonstration, training in these communities, as well as engage in actual production, depending on their biomes. But ERES is also giving a broader meaning to the term regeneration. So taking it out of the agricultural, purely agricultural sense to think about what regeneration means in terms of broader societal design or broader economic design. So they speak of regenerative design and development in Spanish, which is an important criteria for us. It's important to be using the local languages. And have over the years, since 2008, trained over 2,500 people in regenerative design using the Incubar regenerative design and development process, which is both online and in person. So especially in these highly virtual times of COVID, we think that this is a very potent tool to keep people thinking about how they can make a difference at the local level and connect to other actors continentally. This wouldn't be enough if it were just an online initiative with, a loose form of membership scattered throughout the continent. What attracted our attention in the case of ERES was that they have concrete demonstration sites which are also engaging in regeneration at several levels. I'm talking about El Manzano, which is a 400-hectare farm located in Chile. And once again, here we see demonstration training on this Incubar incubation and entrepreneurship program that I mentioned, but we're also seeing actual production. El Manzano is part of the Manada cooperative, which engages in regenerative grazing for meat production at a consumer packaged good level. It's a cooperative that is trying to impulse a new direction in the Chilean meat industry. And when we think that so much land is degraded to cultivate crops which are used for the South American industry, which produces mainly for exports, we need to really focus on grazing and livestock management in this continent, because that's where the main challenge is coming from. And that's also where the tipping point is coming from, as Ercilia Saores, the Latin American coordinator of Regeneration International, highlighted for us. So we have here a network backed by local on-site initiatives that aren't just about training and having visitors over and eco-hospitality and short stays. They engage in production and on-site regeneration at the consumer level, bringing producers and consumers closer together, which is level 4 of Gleesman's framework, and trying to impulse a new direction in the global food system, which is level 5 of the food level change network. So moving on from these projects, we wanted to highlight several tendencies or several next steps that we think Mustardseed could engage in for research and action in Latin America. So this was already mentioned by Marina. It's engaging with people who are on site and having a far broader sample of interviewees to select from in order to understand the specificities of Latin American eco-cultural contexts, which define the possibilities and the scale of regeneration, and also what is going on in terms of production, to see how locally accessible, locally inclusive, regenerative produce-based value chains can be established. So we think that there's definitely an entire year or several years of possible research to understand the complexity of this continent. Another important tendency, and this was mentioned by Renier in his feedback, is the mechanization, the necessary mechanization of RA operations to scale up, and the lacking machinery which is adapted to the multitasking and multifunctionality that is required by regenerative agriculture. So this is actually a gap in our research. We didn't come across any examples of large-scale mechanized regenerative agriculture that was being communicated as such. Definitely an important thing to research if we want to tackle the large-scale agriculture. Linking into that, we also have the need for standardized approaches and methodologies. So ecocultural contexts are very important to lay the foundation for regenerative endeavors, but then to disseminate them, to get the public sector, decision makers, policy makers, and funders in, we need to reassure them, we need to de-risk the approach for them by developing standardized approaches and methodologies that can be replicated, disseminated, and carried over into different types of operations across the continent. Another further point that is essential and is maybe less about research and more about advocacy is the monetization of ecosystem services. So personally, I don't like that term much because we're putting a price tag on natural services, but this came out as a very salient point amongst many of our interviewees. These ecosystem services that regenerative producers provide through their activities should be recognized, monetized in order to support their operations. And finally, I think that Mustardseed could very much benefit from better understanding how it can introduce regenerative efforts that build upon and connect with the incredible wealth of indigenous and traditional knowledge and techniques that we have in South America, one of the greatest repositories in the world. Latin American agro-ecology is an incredible tradition which involves tens of millions of people around the continent and should definitely be built upon. And finally, the global ecosystem restoration agenda, which is, as you all know, going to be propelled at the top of the policy agenda over the next coming decade, with the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration from 2021 to 2030. And we believe that by connecting regenerative agriculture to that agenda in particular, significant leverage can be gained, awareness can be really achieved amongst all of these actors who are going to coalesce around restoration, and they need to understand how restoration and regeneration connect and what they can do in that direction. Okay, now the $5 million question. Massi, would you like to jump in on the first point?
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. We were reading a report now, investing in regenerative agriculture, and what they say is basically now that right now the most regenerative, let's say, forms of investments are either directly in land, so in direct land regeneration, or in private companies that are directly working with land. So if we had 5 million, we would, at the end, we had a bit of a conversation before. We concluded that to be smart enough to invest at least one part in some regenerative agriculture venture, and grant another part to some nodal points of what we were saying before. No, some entities or organizations across these different sectors of regeneration that we think are particularly relevant to scale it up and mainstreaming it, based on the points of the scalability, on the depth of the regeneration, and on the personal fit, of course. Michael, maybe I covered also a bit of a second indeed.
No, that's great. Yeah, so we have the investment aspect, which I guess is up to Mustardseed to decide if they want to go in that direction. But in terms of grants, we have thought of some strategic organizations that have the, let's say, the breadth and the depth to really make a difference. So we're thinking about Coopera Floresta, which is a cooperative that focuses on agroforestry in Brazil. And what we like about them is that they are really making regenerative agriculture, syntropic agroforestry, and many regenerative techniques accessible to Brazilian farmers who are part of this cooperative and who are internalizing this knowledge, making it their own, and increasing their ecological literacy, let's say, as a community, and basically developing techniques that allow their families and their communities to live off of these practices. Because Massi, I can't remember the figure, but we have how many people involved in Coopera Floresta, if you can remember. Basically, we're talking about small initiatives that, when you put them all together within this cooperative, represent a very large-scale effort.
I think it was not just in the cooperative itself, but like in the whole network and project influences. You have like 500 families that are producing. Yeah.
So we think this is essential in terms of grassroots, bottom-up, and local capacity building, and internalizing knowledge at the local community-based level, which is where ultimately the change happens and where a lot of the production comes from too. We have to remember that small-scale farming produces 70% of food in Brazil. Sorry. So the next one, and Massi mentioned this before, is the Ovis 21, the Savory Network Hub in Argentina, EOV certification, Ecological Outcomes Verification certification. We like this one because it is rigorous and it puts quantitative and qualitative standards on regenerative techniques that can be, through the power of networking and the reach of the Savory Network in Latin America, a real game changer when it comes to grazing in the continent. The final one, Massi, would you like to describe it, or should I just go for it? Okay, so is GAS CPS. So once again, we're in Brazil here. GAS is involving around 2.5 million farmers in sustainable agriculture in Brazil, not regenerative, but they have a very inclusive approach to including farmers, ranging from conventional to beyond regenerative, in their network, in order to advocate for more sustainable practices in broad acre annual cropping. So what we mean is, when we say broad acre annual cropping, is all of the annuals that are produced at such a large scale to feed the livestock industry in the continent, soy, cereals, whatever. So that's a key sector to really reduce land degradation and go further than standardized organic practices have been able to in regenerating the land, because as we describe in the report, some organic practices are picked up in a very piecemeal way by producers, and it can result in soil degradation as well. So GAS is doing an amazing job at really advocating for this in Brazil, and we're aware of the huge institutional and agribusiness blockages that this country presents in particular, so they definitely deserve some support. CPS is doing something similar at a smaller scale regarding syntropic agroforestry in Brazil. And indeed, the two are linked. What we noticed about Brazil is that the institutional and political blockages, which are huge at the moment, the level of deforestation, degradation is huge, but they're reflected by the strength of certain networks and movements and the depth of the research and knowledge that is being produced there. So Brazil is definitely a region to watch out for if Mustardseed is looking for specific places to invest in or distribute grants in Latin America. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you very much. Looking forward to your questions.
Great, thank you so much for presentation, quite extensive. Few things that really resonated was one, the networks that you described, especially self-generated networks built from the community level up. Very often, very strong connections there. Also think very interesting to have this deeper look at the mechanization that you mentioned, what kind of innovative technologies are able to operate regenerative agricultural take principles into large-scale operation. So definitely something worthwhile investing or investigating further. What I also really liked what you mentioned was Coopera Floresta, and Boudewijn, who is joining us today, he's a founder of a Dutch community supported agricultural network called Herenboeren. And I think Coopera Floresta is also a really good example of community-driven agriculture, and I think that's definitely a mindset shift we can make as consumers as well. And I really like it that they make this very close connection between consumption and production. And then lastly, what I also what I think is worthwhile looking further into is the investing options, and we're definitely interested further exploring those. So thank you so much for your recommendations in that aspect as well. Are there any emerging questions or comments people want to make? Please raise your hand. Katrina and Marina after.
Yeah, I found also RS and Ovis 21 extremely interesting when I read your report. One particular question about RS is there was some mention in your report about buen vivir, good living, which sort of sounds a little bit like the caring economy or caring about each other. And it said that these concepts were enshrined in the Constitution of Ecuador and in Bolivia. And I wondered if you still knew that this was, but that's pretty significant for me as a former politician to see that level of support, that this different way of living even enters a state constitution. So I wondered if you knew through the process of your report whether that was still relevant in those countries. Is it still adhered to? Is it still, has that made a difference really, getting it into the constitution?
So yes, this concept of buen vivir is derived from the Quechua peoples of the Andes, the Quechua people's concept of sumac kusai, which is about living in community with humans and non-humans in, let's say, eco-cultural specific contexts. So really being alive to each other, the land, and all that is surrounding us. Buen vivir was derived from that concept and indeed integrated into the constitutions of Bolivia and Ecuador in 2008 and 2009. This would also be a further point that could be interesting for you to delve deeper into. I think that this concept of buen vivir came at a time when agroecology and let's say the power of the indigenous driven agenda within Bolivian politics, especially with Evo Morales, was very prominent. And these are countries specifically where agroecology, small-scale agriculture, using indigenous and traditional techniques are very, very developed. They don't really use the term regenerative agriculture because they're already doing it with a different label and at a smaller scale. So to my knowledge, they're still in the constitution. However, as you know, Bolivia in particular has taken a turn towards the right. And I do believe that over the coming years, we'll have to see how these concepts are actually applied in person, whether it's just a question of principle or of actual practice. But Bolivia and Ecuador are very, let's say, potent places for which to expand collaborations with the agro-ecological agenda, which is intimately linked to Buen Vivir, the idea of food sovereignty that was introduced by the agro-ecological network Via Campesina. So we describe that in further detail in the report. But we have to bear in mind that the volatility of Latin American politics is extremely high at the moment. So I don't know what's going on the ground. Don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Massi.
I think it's perfect, Michael. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Marina also had a question or a comment.
Yeah. I was just wondering if it was at some point a challenge for you when you were mapping the actors to find to select those that are using the terms regenerative agriculture and agroecology. But I mean, that's the real, I mean, that's the term, the term is not being co-opted by other organizations and movements using it, but they are not practicing it. If it was hard for you, it was a challenge to kind of, you know, find the good organizations and actors.
Maybe we can start, Michael, then if you have to add. Wow, a challenge. Yeah, I mean, many challenges have been going on, not at the point, but all the way, because it's a huge topic. And as you said also before, now the time was so limited, but you really need to be careful also, because we felt it as a responsibility as well, no? Because like, I don't know, it's kind of, there is a moment of definition of what is regenerative in a way that is horrible almost to say, because how do you say what is not, but is what is happening. So it's like, I think the approach that we kept all the way through was to try to individuate. Okay, we had a lot of single projects at the beginning. There was a moment where we had this huge list of like around 200 entries, and so that's where we started to say, okay, how are they connected together? Or are they working like in a similar field? Do we have any formal or informal connection, or any middle actor, let's say, that is kind of matching them together? And so we started clustering them together because of different reasons. No? One can be like formal pertaining to a network, or one can be like it's being inspired by the same approaches, or working referencing the same people. I don't know, like you have different ways, and try to understand the connections between them, and to kind of put them into a narration that was that is creating kind of a context of where these actors are involved. So this led also to take out some that, as you said, maybe they had like a beautiful website, but then they just, you could see nobody was mentioning them. Also during the interviews, I've seen also you have performed interviews, and that was also for us a great help in understanding much better who are the ones that kept coming back as a name, you know? Who are the ones that people are referencing to? And so it was a bit of this mixed research, reading articles, watching a lot of videos about a lot of video interviews, especially during COVID. You had so many online interviews, and that was really a great resource. And try to understand, not the actor itself, but the whole context where things are happening. And that helped for sure. There is a lot of imperfection still, because like the time was very limited, but that helped a lot in understanding who is really part of a bigger movement, let's say, and who is just representing its image on the web. Yeah. That's still a risk that we have a moment, and we are clear about it. But I believe that we've done the best we could do, at least in this time. I don't know, Michael, if you want to add anything on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Marina, you're absolutely right. I mean, the term regenerative is being co-opted for communications or marketing sometimes. It's also a mainly English-speaking term. I mean, we have people who talk about agricultura regenerativa and stuff, but always in a more diffuse way than this is our product and it's regenerative and it's certified and so it was a challenge, and the overlaps with agroecology were very frequent. And that's why I think it's great. And I was really pleased to see that Mustardseed had indeed commissioned one study on agroecology to understand what's already there, what is rooted in the land, and regenerative agriculture, which is much more recent and coming from other places in the world. So good job on your selection there.
Thank you. Well, that also kind of came up through discussions we had. We thought it was also very interesting to see how both work complements each other. And I think that beautifully comes back in both reports. And it's very interesting that you mentioned that, the classification of all these projects. It's a very, very interesting topic in its own almost. And I think also what you mentioned is that now you're, as a researcher during the COVID pandemic, you also see perhaps we are now bringing all our boardroom discussions on YouTube. It's actually creating a good resource for information and knowledge. So I hope maybe there are opportunities there as well to create a library of these kind of knowledge sharing conversations that are happening all around the world. Are there any other closing comments? Otherwise, I would like to move to Kirsten, but Kirsten has a question. Oh, and Steph. So Kirsten and then Steph, and I think then we wrap up.
Thanks. Yeah, my question was actually about this classification. So Marina used a classification that I think was really clear and really helpful also in being able to select the most important actors, because it allows you to make a good analysis. And I was wondering if Massi and Michael feel like that could be something that could be applied in retrospect to our respective researchers to kind of streamline it and to make it more easy to compare and to contrast the different results.
Yeah, absolutely. We went for an old school Excel sheet to represent our list of organizations and of individuals with a classification that is reflected in our report. So between the 5 categories that Massi mentioned. And I think that harmonizing it with the other studies could definitely be a further next step to end up with a pretty massive database of projects and individuals. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe if I can add to that, I really enjoyed going through both of your reports, and yeah, I really liked the frameworks, the 4 frameworks adopted by Marina. We have 1 overlapping, but we have 3 more after. So we were commenting about it with Michael indeed yesterday. We were saying, it's kind of, we really focus on trying to tell the story, and to reconstruct a bit these movements of the networks. So you could say that it is a bit more actor-oriented in a way. I'm sure also Marina drew down a super long list, but the report is a bit more about this like situation-oriented. Now I don't know if it's the right word, and you can also answer to that, but it's like I have the feeling just seeing our two products in a way that I don't know. I think that as it can complement very well also in the approach. Apart from this regenerative and agroecology, I think also the approach is very much complementary. So yeah, to answer to your question, Kirsten, I definitely see how it can be useful. I think it's a very useful lens. It's a set of very useful lenses, the one she has adopted. I also feel that I'm also happy with our approach, that maybe we have a couple of lenses left, let's say, but of telling the story and show the merging and the interrelationships between these actors.
Thank you. Yeah.
Busy man. I don't know if Michael agrees. This is my point of view, obviously.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. We really enjoyed the presentation so far. Kind of building on Kirsten's point about harmonizing data between the studies, the natural progression of that is how we, what your thoughts are on how we could present the data such that someone coming into the space could contextualize all the information and see the relative importance of organizations perhaps, like Massi was saying, some of them have a great website, but have very little impact. So this constellation map, or mind map, of which there were some slides that in your presentation that were very helpful, perhaps could be a way of accelerating someone's understanding. And it could be who knows, it could be a resource that we make publicly available after this research, because the presentations and the Excel sheets are great, but yeah, I'm curious how you think you can convey the big picture and all the relationships quicker between the 5 focus areas that you identified.
Okay, thank you for that question. It's actually a question to all of the researchers, perhaps, but let's keep the answers a little bit brief, because we don't want to, in about 2-3 minutes, we want to move to Kirsten's presentation, so we have time for her. Michael, do you have comments?
Sure. No, I think that's a great idea. The idea of mind map, or maybe showing the different mycelia, between these nodal points, these hubs, could be a way forward. However, we spent quite a bit of time wondering on how to categorize it, and as Emmy mentioned, it's an entire topic in itself. So on the one hand, if you want to present it to the general audience, you have to stay simple, but you also want to reflect the reality adequately without simplifying, and it's a balancing act. And I think that what we have for now, as a group of researchers, all 4 of us, is a good step in thinking of how we could harmonize that in terms of categories, and then visually represent it as a constellation, which is the fitting word in this case.
Yeah, thank you for that response. Marina, do you have a comment on this?
I want to add to that, because I think it's, I mean, I agree with Michael, and then I think it's also, I mean, the databases that we all had, like the 4 researchers that we built, they are super long, and they have a diversity of actors in terms of practices, in terms of where they are in the food system, in terms of countries, in terms of, some working with livestock, some working with, cocoa, coffee. So it's hard to find one single way. I mean, I don't know. I think all of the researchers, we've been struggling with this, how to visually represent in the end. And I think it's also a matter of harmonizing. So the first step would be to harmonize the information that we all have. And then also in terms of kind of what are the key messages that we want to extract from this database. So it's, as I mentioned, what we want to prioritize, because it's so broad and vast. So is it about those that are in the level 5 of transformation, and those that are working with this specific link of the food system? And then we can group this information and do a lot of different infographics, but it's about also knowing what kind of information we want to prioritize. What are the key messages that we want to take from the database?
Absolutely, yeah, certainly. All right, I would like to give the stage to Kirsten. She would like to start, I guess, presenting her report as well, feeding into the larger discussion. So Kirsten, go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's been really, really nice to hear the other 2 present. So for everyone here, we haven't actually met each other before. At least I haven't met any of the other researchers before, and we recently just saw each other's research, so we've all been avidly reading each other's reports and learning from each other, and it's been really great. It's been such a fun project, I think, for all of us. So thank you for the opportunity, and yeah, I really look forward to discussing the 3 questions with you. So when, oh, maybe I should do a little introduction too, because the other ones did that. So my name's Kirsten. I'm based in the Netherlands, and I have a master's in health, community, and development, which is an interdisciplinary master's. And I started my career in the international NGO sector as a monitoring evaluation researcher. And I've since moved on to becoming more of a consultant in both the public sector as well as the private sector, advising businesses on how to become more sustainable and how to measure their sustainability. some of that also includes a lot of monetization of things, which was mentioned before and is not maybe not aligned with our philosophical preferences, but practically quite useful. In 2017, I joined the first ecosystem restoration camp in the southeast of Spain and spent a year there building the first camp, and basically fell in love with the whole concept of restoration and regeneration. And that's why I was really grateful for the opportunity to be able to do some research on it and learn more about it. So when it comes to the two actors that I would recommend, I find it a difficult question because I think, as you can see in all the reports, there was such a diversity of actors, and they all play different key roles in the ecosystem. So it's hard to say just pick two that will cover the necessary transition. But I think one that's really important to me was Precious Fury, who is a lady working throughout the south and east of Africa, and is very well connected. Maybe I can share my screen too, so we can see all the different organizations that she's linked to. I will share my screen now and go to, oh, it's blocked. Hold on one sec. I'm struggling with the size. Here we go.
You meet her in person?
I didn't meet her in person, no. I interviewed her online. She was in her home for COVID and I was in my home for COVID. So I was able to talk to her for about an hour about the things that she was doing. And as you can see, she's linked to at least all of these organizations and probably many more. Regeneration International is the one that I found her through. So she is the Africa coordinator for Regeneration International. So she also knows all of the parties listed on the regional Regeneration International website active in Africa. And the initiative that she's most passionate about herself is the Seed and Knowledge Initiative, because it's a very bottom-up organization that is linking farmers to each other and to native seeds that are not patented and that are able to be propagated. So that Seed and Knowledge Initiative is basically working to help farmers lead their own systems of food sovereignty. And it's a really interesting one because they're also linking together many different levels of policy and of farmers and governments, and so it's really interesting. And then she's also linked to PALM, which is the Participatory Ecological Land Use Management Association. It's a long one, but they operate in 10 countries at least in Africa, and they're spreading. And they don't list regenerative agriculture specifically as something that they're active in, but they're like by everything that they do, they could be put under that definition. And I think that's something that goes for all the researchers, that we found a lot of initiatives that maybe don't label themselves as such, but are definitely aligned. And two others that I'd like to mention that she's involved with are AFSA. AFSA because they're linked to 50 African countries, so they're really widely spread, and they also have a network that's not only linked to farmers, but also, for example, to faith-based organizations, which are really important when you want to connect to the local communities, for example, but also to food producer networks and to CSOs and indigenous knowledge organizations, which are all really important for really rooting at the grassroots, I think. And then the last one that I want to mention on her page is Rescope, which focuses on educating children about permaculture. And permaculture is another one of those words. So we have agroecology and regenerative agriculture and permaculture. So in Africa, permaculture is quite a big recognized word. And to me, it also really embodies that care economy principle very well. It can sometimes be a little bit fluffy, so it really needs to be linked to kind of, yeah, a vision and targets, and like how do you really work with the land, because permaculture can also be very much focused just on the social side. So But Rescope does, for example, train young people on how to create a permaculture garden and things like that. So I think starting from the youth is also quite important. While at the same time, what I found is that the elders in Africa actually really recognize the principles that are in regenerative agriculture or permaculture. So it's much, some people said like, oh yeah, this is what my grandparents used to do when now we start to promote these methods. So it's something, because obviously like they're linked to, regenerative agriculture is always linked to making the system fit in the local context the best, and the old ways fit in the local context better than the ones that have been imposed by colonialism and the whole monoculture mechanized way of doing agriculture. So I think rather than giving you a second actor, I think I mentioned quite a few already in this one, and it's not because I can bunch a whole group of them together without choosing, but I really think that Precious is just really, really essential in this network, and she's yeah, really well connected. But I think if we're looking for other actors, I'm personally really big on networks and creating proper links. So what I'm really interested in is actors who have new ways of bringing everyone together in a way that also dismantle normal power relations. For example, when you bring a smallholder farmer together in a room with a government actor, then there's immediately these power relations. So how do you make sure that everyone listens to each other? Same goes for if there is, for example, people being excluded based on not being part of a certain clan or being part of a certain religion. And so what I find interesting in that context is the chapter on social architects that I included in the research, who are people who basically have good ideas about how to bring the right people into the room and how to make sure that everyone participates. So those two would be, for example, the Embassy of the Earth is quite a small one, but the Southern Africa Food Lab is already quite big and active across multiple African countries. So they might be interesting to look at as well. Then when we talk about next steps for the research, I just wanted to share this slide. To me, it feels like there's different things that we could focus on with next steps. So on the one hand, you could continue developing more knowledge for the community at large, which I think is something that we've done now with this research. Something that benefits broadly, you know, just creating more awareness about certain issues that play into regenerative agriculture and the scaling thereof. And on the other hand is more specifically targeted towards mustard seed and would be more in line with action learning to see what the next steps for you could be. And then in between, there's a bit of overlap where things that you could do for yourself would also benefit the community. So on the far left side, when it's more about developing knowledge for the community, I would be interested in more academically and more deeply researching the Pestelli factors, so the political, economic, social, technical, ecological, legal, and international factors. And so I've listed here a question per element that would be interesting to research. For example, politically, I named various countries in my research who had good policies that generated large-scale ecosystem restoration and regeneration. But a question that still lingers for me is how much those policies actually contributed, because I think a lot of the change happens through direct action, and I'm not sure that the policies need to precede that. And there's also been, in some of the interviews with people that I spoke with, a lot of distrust about governmental policy effects. And they said, you know, if I see an organization and I know that it's linked to a government, then I'm less inclined to want to work with them, because I think it's just going to be really slow, bureaucratic, and it's going to be a lot of people in suits talking. So I'm curious about how much those policies were the trigger versus just kind of a framework in which the action happened. Then economically, I'd be interested in diving a bit deeper into the role of subsidies, because if general agriculture is subsidized and sometimes regenerative agriculture isn't labeled as agriculture anymore because it involves trees and then you fall out of the system, blah, blah, blah. How does that affect the system? Socially, I'm really interested in like what are the best practices in the social cultural approach that can be scaled, because I also see a lot of like large scale technical approaches that fail to properly embed themselves in the social system. But I don't want to exclude foreign actors or actors that are larger multinational actors just because they're not grassroots. I think they can still be effective, but like what can we learn about those social cultural aspects? So I won't go through all of them because I think it's going to take a long time, but more on the in the middle, I think is where the magic happens. So I think it'd be really interesting to streamline and complete the framework and categorization of the three studies that we did. Also because I've heard, for example, from Ethan Soloviev, he's really interested in getting the data, and I think that if the data is as different amongst each other, then it's not as useful to the community. So I think that would be great. I also think it's really important to interview more local actors. So in my own research, I interviewed mostly the people that I could get a hold of more easily, which were closer to me and not necessarily the ones locally. So I'm really interested in learning more about how they view things and to verify also via them if the ones that I found are indeed the most essential. Mapping the relation between the actors would be interesting. So, you know, via interviews, we did kind of hear, like, I did ask them, oh, do you know each other? Do you know this organization? But obviously it's not complete yet. So it'd be interesting to know who knows who and who's working together. And also to see what would happen if all of our research brought together the people that we found as the most important ones. So we can't bring the 200 that we each found together, but a selection, and then see what happens, see if they know each other, see what they can do together. And the final two are studying the actual impact readiness or the effectiveness of the selected actors. I think that's been mentioned before. And also mapping the investor space a little bit better. That's something that I had to scope out of my research for time reasons, but I think is really interesting as well. So that's it for my suggested next steps. And then what I would do with 5 million, I would be quite excited to, if I was Mustardseed, for example, to try and connect with like a few actors in the important roles. So those roles could be, for example, the ones from Marina's framework, or the various roles that I highlighted as chapters, or a combination thereof. We need to see like who needs to be brought together for a huge change to be made. To do that in a specific region, and then kind of trial with each other if we can create like a local project or spanning maybe a sub-region of a country, where we try to implement change by bringing together and the policymakers and the market connectors and the farmers themselves, and to really create like a pilot project and see what we can learn from that. So I don't know, I'd be really excited about creating a pilot project basically with the 5 million and seeing what can work and what can happen if you bring the right people together in the right way. For example, also being supported by one of those social architects, for example. Yeah, I think that'll be it for now. I'm really curious to hear your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presentation. And yeah, seems like a beautiful little Regen Ag utopia that would exist then. Would bring those actors together. And definitely, I think there's as you see, there is an emerging, there are all the knowledge hubs that are coming up and are making connections and bridging people together. So hopefully there will be a good stage. Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm definitely keen to have a conversation with Precious Piri at some point, because you made us be really interested in meeting her.
Yeah.
And interesting, yeah, we know Pelham a little bit through one of our partners, which is the URDT in Uganda. They're also working together with Pelham, so it's great that some organizations that are somehow in our constellation are coming back through this research. A little bit of proof of that we're not doing something completely, that we are actually doing work in the field. And yeah, thank you so much for presenting that. And it's for us also really interesting to have further think about, like, you know, what can we do as Mustard Seed, which is interesting for us, but also for the purpose of the research or for the general public, so that overlap that you presented has a very interesting recommendations for us. So are there any emerging questions or comments from the audience? And I have Katrina.
Yeah, I'm generally always interested in the obstacles. So what stands in the way of, it's like everybody knows this works, so why isn't it happening? What is standing in the way from allowing it to happen? And one particular thing you mentioned, which is maybe particular only to Africa, I don't know, was this issue about land ownership and the difficult nature of and also the low level of trust within some nations with regard to the government and the state, and then that inhibits, if you don't know whether or not this land is yours, if you don't know if you're going to have it in the long term, then you're less likely to be able to invest in it, and because regen will may take many years before you see any results. So how might we get over that obstacle? And did you get the feeling that it was an issue over many parts of Africa? And did you see any projects or any people that were finding solutions for that obstacle?
Yeah, thank you. I think there are, I'll start backwards. So I think there are some organizations that are active in labeling land with using satellite information. I don't remember off the top of my head which one it was, but I think it's definitely an important problem. There was an article in The Correspondent a few years ago about how the most boring Dutch organization has a really important solution for these issues, and that's the Kadaster, so the organization that labels land ownership and measures it and says who it belongs to, etc. I think it's definitely an important problem. I can't say with certainty where exactly in Africa it plays as the biggest problem, but in general, I got the sense that, for example, land grabbing is definitely an issue, and it's insecure. But at the same time, I feel like that would be, yeah, I don't know if I can comment on that actually soundly, but yeah, I don't know. I think it deserves more research. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Bela?
Yeah, in URDT, Musheshi's organization in Uganda, you know, he set up a land rights organization, and they documented maybe 10,000 different cases over many years. Also, I think, I hope he was invited to this conference.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, someone from his organization could help a lot. But while I've got the floor, I wanted to ask everyone a question. I've spent a lot of my career in working with librarians and information scientists, and you know, culling out authoritative information from the rest of data. And I wondered if any of you know someone who has abilities with that in this field of regenerative agriculture related fields, because organizing information and distinguishing what is authoritative and what isn't, and making it available has made a huge difference to endeavors of all kinds. So if any of you happen to think of someone who has expertise, I'd really like to be in touch with them. I have great respect for information scientists and librarians. I'm working with them for many decades.
Thank you. Yeah. Kirsten, I don't know if you want to respond to it.
Yeah, an organization that's really dedicated to organizing the information around regenerative agriculture, I don't know of, but I do know that, for example, World Agroforestry and the World Resource Institute are important institutes in this regard, in the sense that they do collect a lot of data, but I would call them researchers more than data scientists. I know that, for example, Ethan Soloviev he's more of a, I think, an independent consultant, but he's doing this work, for example, for America. He created a really nice map of different actors. So I think he'd be really keen to, because he's also the one that asked for my data or our data, to work on that. So I'm not sure if he's a data scientist in the librarian sense, but I think he might be someone to talk to. He might also know more people who are working on this as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Stefan.
Marina, sorry, Kirsten, thank you for your presentation. I wondered if you could expand on your $5 million answer. So from what I heard, it sounded like applying the whole framework to a specific area. So I'm curious if you had a place in mind, or what scale, of what period of time, and how you promote it.
Yeah. I think in terms of which place, that's one of the next research questions that I didn't speak out loud, but that is in the diagram, is that I think it'd be good to research which actual spot either needs it most or is most ready for it right now. So I don't actually have the definite answer to that, because it requires more information about soil types and what their climate vulnerability is, etc. So I don't know the specific area, but I think with $5 million, you could select a region. So I would say, like, definitely not a whole country, but maybe like a watershed level you could choose, and say you spend around at least 5 years there. I don't know how fast the money would go. It really depends on, like, if you pay for all the machinery to get there and do stuff, or if you find partners and things like that. But I think 5 million could get you a long way in, like, properly exploring the area and finding the right partners for it, and also paying someone who really has the time to lead it and to get to know the place and create the right connections, as well as starting to actually trial on little pilot plots what works in that locality, etc. So I would feel like maybe a 5-year pilot project in a watershed area would be exciting to do.
Sounds like maybe a good goal for the next stage to explore that.
Thank you. Yeah. Michael?
Hi, Kirsten. Thank you very much for the presentation and the report. You mentioned the Great Green Wall initiative in your report, which is a huge initiative to regreen a band of land from Senegal to Djibouti. And I was wondering if you came across any more specific, let's say, efforts within that huge initiative, which is sort of difficult to understand online. There isn't much information available. I was wondering if you'd come across any initiatives that specifically referred at a local or subnational level to regenerative agriculture or to African agro-ecology as a main means of regenerating the land and providing a barrier to desertification.
Yeah, it is indeed a really difficult project to learn about more online. And it's strange because it's such a large and well-funded project. But to me, so I basically, I looked at it, and then I saw that they also had become very fragmented in the sense that within each country, there would be communities working on it, but there would also be international NGOs working on bigger sections, and it's a huge puzzle, and kind of a can of worms that I didn't dare explore much more, because it's also so hard to actually find something about it. So I have found a few organizations that are in that belt and that are active in regreening, but I haven't labeled them as such, for example, as being part of the Great Green Wall in the Excel sheet. So that might be something really interesting to do. I'm also very much wondering if there are people trying to research the Great Green Wall in a more systematic way, because I feel like a lot of people are wondering what's going on there, and there's been a lot of noise around it and a lot of people active in it, and very little to show yet for results. And at the same time, some people have also published satellite photos showing that actually large swaths have been regreened, but it's not clear who was then exactly responsible for that. Or I think a large part of it was actually farmers themselves doing farmer-managed natural restoration. So that actually accounts for a large part of the restoration, I know, at least in the west part. But I can't really speak to all the other organizations that are involved.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. We are going to wrap up a little bit. So I think Marina, maybe you can go for the last question or comments, and then we're going to wrap up, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, it's more a comment. It's not actually a question, but I was super happy to see that you've talked about APSA. And I think it really links to both, to two things that you've mentioned. So first, one question regarding next steps when we're looking into the political aspect, is it what comes first, actually, and how the policies can be used as a framework to spark change. And it links also to your vision of how to use $5 million, because I think APSA is trying to build a common food policy for Africa. And then I think would really, it's a bridge between both, having a common food policy that could spark change in the region, as well as having this effort of bringing the right actors in the same room so that they can all work together to build that. So yeah, so I was just happy to see that in your presentation.
Thanks. Yeah, you've done research in Africa before too, I saw. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, everyone who's with us in the room today. I'm very keen, very glad that we have so many people joining in and listening in. So. But I'm not going to say more, because I would like to give the word to Alida, who's the chair of the Board of Trustees, and she has been following progress from the initiation of our ideas, and she's part of the work group that we had within Mustardseed. So Alida, maybe you would like to continue.
Thank you, Emmy. And thank you all for participating in our first meetup. And it's for us as Mustardseed actually the first time that we invite external people to help us to shape our strategy, because we recognize it's good to get out of the bubble in which we may want to sit and to get fresh ideas on how we would move forward as Mustardseeds. And I would like to thank all the researchers for the work done. We knew there was a sea of information out there, and definitely you tapped into the sea. And I think the good news is that you helped us to mapping a lot of things. We got deeper insight in the different actors that are there, and also the factors that are having influence either in the positive or negative way. I think what came out very clearly also that farming and farming systems are very diverse worldwide. So whatever interventions we do, we need to keep always that in the back of our mind. I think what did not come out very clear And that is most likely because the way we formulate the terms of reference. When we talked about the actors, I mean, excellent. The factors, given our mission of wanting to create caring economies, or at least enabling that to happen, I think the factors on the economy and how that affects the RE sector and the food systems, I think that is an area we definitely want to follow up onto. If we talk about the follow-up research, I think that is an area we want to explore further. And what I say, that is most likely because of our terms of reference that didn't come out that clearly. I think when it comes to the report, I think all the reports from that has something for us that we can build on. Some of them already were mentioned in these presentations as well, the different models, which are very helpful. The Gliesman framework, I think, was useful. The food systems, and then of course your findings and recommendations will help us to think deeper about the strategy which we are developing. We are still internally discussing what are the effective methods for mustard seed actually to give hand and feet to our mission. And I'm very grateful that these kind of conversations help us to think deeper. So I think this is not the last time that we will meet, maybe in different ways, but I'm sure this conversation also has sparked for Bella as my fellow Board of Trustees member, and Stefan and our operational team, more ideas on how we move forward. So I would like to thank you for being here. And what we normally do in our own meetings before we close, we give everybody the opportunity just to say a line or two on how they have experienced the meeting. So I would like to do that same ritual, supported by Emmy, to give us all a turn to say a word or two. Would you like to do that, Emmy?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea. Let me start with myself then, and then after the last one, Alida can close off, and then we wrap up.
Okay.
I thought it was an amazing conversation to hear and highlight the things that we have been reading about. You give, I like your opinion about what the next step in the research is, and I think, I would almost like to suggest oh, let's get together next week and talk about this in more detail. So definitely something for us to go back to. I think the framing part of it. So thank you so much for giving us and inspiring us today. Then I'll go to the person next to me, Katrina.
Yeah, the most thing I got out of today was all the extreme enthusiasm, and that always comes over when we speak to you as researchers, and that always comes over, and that came over also in your reports as well. So, and also that makes us then, who are a bit older and a bit maybe more negative about the future, so much more hope and seeing all those aspirations that we can do this. We just need people like the organisation yourselves, and also organisations like Mustardseed, to get together and find out what are the keys and how can we move on to that next step. So thank you.
And Bela, you're muted. Sorry.
I'd call myself older and positive about the future, but I found the whole conversation very inspiring and motivating. Thank you.
Thank you. Reinier?
Yes, I had the privilege to review all those studies, and I'm active on a practical level for over 10 years with land and water management in Africa. But I never had the opportunity to look at it like the whole sector as structured as those reports were. So I was supposed to review, but I learned a lot from it, and it felt a bit like the student reviewing the teacher sometimes. But I have really tried to give the angle of the farmer, so of someone involved in farming. So yeah, like Marina said, maybe that was a bit one-sided sometimes, but I think it's really important, and I hope the farmer, as a result of this transformation, can become more central in the whole food system instead of like some very insignificant actor who is supposed to produce and not be involved in the rest of the supply chain.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. And Stefan?
Yeah, as Katrina said, kind of a great way to start the day. Feel very inspired. Feel like as a species we're this is, you know, we're going to earn the right to have our place on this planet. So thank you all. Looking forward to the next stage.
Thank you. Massi?
Yeah, the main feeling definitely, as you already said, inspiration and thankfulness. Really thankful of opportunity of researching this, of doing it with Michael, of reading the feedback from Renier was very useful indeed, and in also shaping a bit our approach. And on seeing how Mustardseed is working as well, it's really inspiring to know that there are organizations working in this direction and with these modalities. And in seeing the other researchers, we were like, it was easy to feel lonely in a way, even if we were in two. So it's really nice to have this last big sharing celebrative moment. So yeah, I leave the meeting with a lot of joy and really happy that you organized this and to be all here far but connected. So thanks.
Thank you. And Boudewijn?
Well, back on camera. I'm really thankful to be here. Thank you for inviting me for this conversation. It was very inspirational. Like you mentioned, we started an initiative in the Netherlands almost 8 years ago. We started with just one farm. And there were a large part of the history of our initiative, we felt very lonely in the Netherlands. And now being member of this global family and listening to all these initiatives all over the globe in Africa and in South America, it's really nice to hear and to connect with you and to learn from you and then translate that back to our country where we have a lot of farmers and too few farmers who think like you investigated. So I was very thankful to be with this. Hope to see an invitation again. So thank you.
Thank you. And then Michael?
Thank you, everyone. I feel a lot of gratitude for this moment of sharing after these weird months where it felt funny to work on these really important questions in such a time of isolation. So this is bringing a lot of sense to me. I'm honored to be part of this effort. Thank you to the Mustardseed Trust. Thank you to the fellow researchers for their amazing research. And I really hope to connecting with you all again, wherever you are in the world. It's crazy to think that we have my friend John in California, Mozambique, Singapore, Costa Rica, a bit of Europe too. That's just really inspiring. So really thank you so much and keep in touch.
Thank you. And as you mentioned, John, let's move to John.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's lovely to see everyone, and pretty early for me, but I was able to get out of my tent and listen to this, and what a wonderful thing. And I've seen the report. It's quite lovely as well. So very good that we're moving forward. We have the responsibility of restoring all degraded land on the earth, but most people have not yet realized that. And it certainly goes beyond just regenerative agriculture. It has to go
to the wild areas and to the massive biodiversity as well. So I think this knowledge is unstoppable. And if humanity is to survive in peace and prosperity, then it will understand this. And it will be the central intention of human civilization. So it's moving in that direction. I feel grateful that there's so many wonderful people. I'm very grateful to Mustardseed for making these kinds of efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, and well, thank you for being here today as well, as reference, as Michael said. Then next to you, on my screen at least, is your colleague Jan Heijn.
Hi, thank you very much for having me here. As I have some guests arriving, I'll keep it short. But I'm incredibly happy to be part of this development, which is taking place all over the world. I think it's a fantastic new movement with great opportunities, and I love the fact that especially young people are so attracted by it that they really try to seek a new way in which they will create their own lives as part of their in their own environment. So no, I'm happy to be here. So thank you very much. Great to meet you all.
Thank you very much. Marina.
Hi. So just wanted to say that I'm very thankful for the opportunity of doing this research, and especially to have this exchange with all of you. I've learned a lot during the whole process, during the research and also during this conversation. I'm the kind of person that really benefits from exchanging, and this was a very good opportunity to learn and also to think about connecting the dots between the different researches, also the gaps. It was very enriching. And I remember doing the interviews and after finishing the interviews with the actors in South America to feel very excited about these exchanges. So, I mean, I guess it's not every day that we are intellectually challenged and that we have this interest in what we're doing. And even with Rainer's comments in the draft, sometimes I just felt like being a little bit challenged, but it was interesting to really question myself if I was going the right direction. His comments, they were super pertinent, and I was like, does it make sense? Maybe yes, maybe not, and then to look further for that. So yeah, it was very interesting to be part of this research. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Kirsten?
Yes, I share all these feelings. I think I'm just really excited because it feels like the start of something important. Like I feel we've set the basis, starting to collect data that's much needed, and also reflecting back on whether we're optimistic or pessimistic and young and old. I mean, I'm a young person who's sometimes pessimistic about it, but then researching this just makes me really hopeful because I see that so many people are working on great solutions, and it just it gave me a lot of joy to work on it. So thanks for the opportunity, and really nice to meet you all.
Thank you. And then Alida.
Yeah, what to say? I think I want to say I'm very grateful. And some time back we said, okay, we want to move from Mustardseed simply giving grants to people, but actually to enable conversations about things of the heart. And I think this meetup was a sign of that we have found people with whom we share the same heart. So definitely, I hope this is not the last time that we have this meetup. And it's now, the ball is back into Emmy's courtyard to enable these conversations to continue. And soon we will have a board meeting, and definitely this conversation, the research, will help us to have a deeper meaning of how we want to move forward as Mustardseed. So thank you very much, all of you, for creating time to be in this meetup. And thanks, John, for getting out of your tent all the way. I'm very delighted to see you after some time. How is California? Can you say just one word about how you are doing?
Well, it's been a challenge because I haven't been able to see my wife for the last few months.
Yeah.
But I have made a good use of my time in California doing the live stream in Malibu and then helping this camp and another camp in Oregon to develop. This is a really important biome. This is the huge ancient forest that absorbed the moisture coming off the Pacific Ocean and naturally regulates the hydrology, the weather, and the climate for all of the Western United States all the way to the continental divide, and probably beyond if you think that system then generates a movement toward the middle of the country. So I've been learning a lot here about the different types of biodiversity, the different types of disruptions, and the multi-generational trauma that the people and the land have to overcome. So it's quite clear that ecological restoration is very possible, but the degradation is caused by ignorance and by selfishness, and that it's human beings that need to change to determine what the what the final outcome will be for the landscapes and for human civilization. So I've really had a great time. There are bears nearby, and every day a hummingbird comes and flies up to me, and I see deer walking around, and there's quite a lot. I haven't met the rattlesnakes or the scorpions yet, so I'm still okay with that. And it's great to be here. Oh, there's a train. Yes, that's true.
Thanks for sharing that, John, so much. Somebody talked about it's so good to see young people taking interest in this, and I fully agree with that. And we always say in our trainings to young people, and John is an embodiment of that, be the change you want to see. And I think, John, you really are an inspiration for us. And please stay safe there. And I want to say that to everybody. Please keep safe. Yeah, and let's stay connected. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, everybody, have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.